Thanks everybody for having me. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. What I'm going to do is actually walk through the best practices for taking a Microsoft exam. So what I want to do is really engage you in understanding what it's like to take an exam and arm you with the entire process so that you can be, essentially at your best, and give you a lot of resources to take away from this particular talk. As Barca said, Brian Swiger, I'm a cloud solution architect in the customer success unit here in the Southeast. I'm actually just north of Tampa. And I've been with Microsoft I'm coming up on 5 years. It'll be at the end of this year. And I've been a developer architect in the apps and infra space for a long time, 20 plus years. So started out C++ doing military work. It was a government contractor for many years. So getting started here, effectively, why are we even interested in taking exams, and what are our thought process around that from a Microsoft perspective? As Barca mentioned, we actually are required internally to take the exams as well and get certified. We really want to be a focused as a learn-it-all culture. So it's actually a cultural thing inside of Microsoft. From Satya, who this is, Satya Nadella, our CEO, all the way down. So it's really about being a learn-it-all rather than that know-it-all individual. So constantly learning, constantly evolving. If you think throughout the entire process and IT in general, I've been working in IT for 20 plus years now, and I was, doing C++ and make files. We didn't have mobile devices. We didn't have disconnected experiences. We didn't really have IoT and devices and edge devices. So it's really about continuing to evolve as the technology and the sector evolves. So really understanding to be a learn-it-all and always wanting to be curious, experimental, and being able to learn. So like I said, in this session, we'll talk about understanding the Microsoft certification process, what it's like to develop an exam. So I'll give you some insider information there in terms of developing an exam, what it's like to plan and take the exam, some study resources. So studying is obviously very important, and then actually taking the exam. And I encourage everyone listening to this talk or engaging here to go take an exam. I'm all an advocate about taking the exams as almost essentially kind of a measure of where you're at in your learning journey. So why exams? We really look at the fact that we have a skills shortage. So these exams came out and are constantly being evolved as we kind of transform into this cloud native world. A lot of the technologies, as I mentioned, are constantly changing, constantly evolving. And that's really where the exam opportunities come from, is to help skill everyone up, not only to understand, but also get hands-on and build that opportunity out for various individuals. So a lot of the folks, this is always subjective in terms of benefits of getting certified. My thought process in getting certified is I always view this as a midterm and final. If you remember from school, we always had to have a midterm and a final. I at least take 2 exams every year, and I force myself to go learn a new topic and go learn a new space, just so I have some exposure to it. I'm always a fan of the benefits of certification to build that ongoing learning and that curiosity. So, there is advancement, you could put this on your resume, all that good stuff. I always say, projects and getting hands-on with the technologies and actually delivering a product or solution and impacting customers, much more important than getting a certification, for instance. But a certification is going to help you build those core concepts and that learning mentality and get you really hands-on with the various products and technologies. So in terms of certified teams, they say, additional talent, productivity, business impact. There's a lot of benefits that a lot of organizations have seen in terms of productivity. A lot of folks have said, what is the top 5 reasons? Kind of distinguish yourself from others, demonstrate essentially your commitment to learning, ongoing learning and validation. And this does build your marketability and credibility. The exams are not easy. We've developed a lot of the exams over the years. When I started out doing exams in exam development about 15 years ago, I actually did this as a side job, aside from my actual day job of being a developer and architect, because I viewed the certification process as kind of a joke. I'm certified in Lotus Notes. If folks remember Lotus Notes, Lotus Domino, I'm a certified Novell administrator. So, I mean, I have a ton of certifications that are not useful today. And so, from your vantage point, why get Microsoft certified? What does that matter? Well, in today's world, again, this is getting hands-on with the technology. This is proving that I can deliver and I can actually do something. And what we've done with a lot of the certifications and a lot of the exams is we've gotten really hands-on with the technologies. So we've heard from the community, we take that feedback from the community and continue to evolve the exams. So the Microsoft exams and the exam process are very hands-on. They're always evolving. So know that the certification that you take is actually relevant to today and actually will change in the next 3 months. So we actually have an ongoing cadence where we're updating all of these exams and refreshing them consistently to be up to speed with the various technologies and formulated technology. So what did we do? We really focused the exams around role-based exams. We moved them away from being a product-specific exam. We also tiered the exams to make sure that we introduced a fundamentals concept. I heard folks talk about the Azure Fundamentals exam. We have Microsoft 365 fundamentals, Dynamics fundamentals. So we really wanted to start with a foundational exam process and then develop that further. We did bring back performance-based testing, and I'm going to talk about that here in a bit. I was a huge fan of that. I was actually involved in bringing that, forthcoming. You can blame me and a team for a lot of the new questions and performance-based testing in general. I'm very proud of Liberty and the team at Microsoft for bringing that forward. We have Azure and the entire platform where you can actually get hands-on and actually build things now and prove that you really know, the technologies. We did unify all the exams, like I said, under a common development process and standards. So we've actually standardized the development process of these exams, and they're ongoing. And as I mentioned, a 30 to 60-day update cycle, sometimes 3 months, to actually publish the exam. And you'll notice folks with the badges. LinkedIn, you'll see badges and all the verification across the networking. So here's the state of Microsoft exams today. You'll see a lot of different exams at different tiers. So if you start in the lower left there, you'll see the fundamentals. And again, as I mentioned, you have the Azure fundamentals across Microsoft 365 fundamentals, Dynamics fundamentals, Power Platform. And as you move up in this diagram, you actually get to the associate and an expert level. So the different exams are also divided up into 3 different multiple categories. We have this 4th new category called specialty on the far right, but they're bucketed into Azure, Modern Workplace, and Business Applications, as well as specialty. And what we wanted to really do is focus these in on roles. You'll see the various roles here that we have across these different areas. So say, for instance, you're an Azure Solutions Architect. You're an architect. I'm a cloud architect on Microsoft Azure. There actually is a certification focused in on what does an architect do. And that really covers a lot of different spectrums in terms of Azure, whether that be an apps and infra. You'll have to know some data aspects, but it's up there in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see that expert level certification. So there's different certifications all across the board that really can help you and focus your particular learning. So those certifications I talked about, from the fundamentals all the way up to that expert, really follow Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy is in terms of understanding, from remembering all the way to creating and being really hands-on to that expert level that I talked about. So the fundamentals exam, when you take a fundamentals exam, you'll see a lot of it is about remembering and recall and understanding. So it's really, a lot of those are multiple choice, understanding, do I really understand what it means to build out a subscription inside of Azure? Do I really understand what a resource group is and what a resource group is meant to be used for? And it goes up Bloom's taxonomy to the professional exams. When I say professional, those really hands-on all the way to the expert level. Do I really know how to take some information and apply that concept? And we carried that forward with the concept of a lab. And I'll talk about, again, that performance-based testing. But the questions and the types of questions actually get a lot more difficult, where you're analyzing information, evaluating the information, and getting very hands-on with the product in terms of delivering a solution. So some of the exam basics, the exams are around 40 to 60 questions. Notice that you want to make sure that you answer all those questions. You're not going to get dinged if you answer. Actually, you're going to get dinged. You're going to miss a question if you just don't answer it. So I always tell people, go with your gut, answer every question. You can come back to them later for review, but don't second guess yourself. That's the key. Plan for about 180 minutes. It depends on how long you take in terms of reading the questions, interpreting. I'm a slow reader, so I have a tendency to take longer on exams. But there's about 30 minutes for instructions, comments, that kind of stuff, and then actual 150 minutes for the exam, especially if it has a performance-based test on it or a lab. Sometimes folks have a tendency to overthink some of the labs and getting hands-on with some of those tasks, so it can take a little bit longer. There are more than just multiple choice questions. So I will say I was involved in that process. You can blame me. I'm an individual that was not very happy with the exams. That's why I got involved 15 years ago. I felt that they were too darn easy. I took a BizTalk exam back in the day. I can't remember what BizTalk version, 15 years ago, and it was all multiple choice. And multiple choice questions, you really can eliminate two right out of the gate. And then it's really a 50-50 shot from there. It's typically a guess between the four. To me, that doesn't validate anything. That just validates that I did a brain dump, that I've learned something and picked an answer. I walked out of that exam with a really high score. I felt I didn't prove anything to anybody or even to myself, and I complained about it. I went back, complained to my team. They said, hey, you ought to do something about it. So I started looking around and signed up to be a subject matter expert. And then I was chosen. And yeah, I've been doing exams ever since. So I'll show you the different question types here in one moment. Case studies, those are actually reading a business case and then answering a set of questions based on that business case. So a lot of folks, I'll show you some tips and tricks here with case studies. Again, I'm a slow reader. So it's really about understanding how to answer the question in terms of that particular business environment. So exam scoring, know that you have to have a 700 to pass, and a 700 is not a 70%. The questions are all rated differently, so you could have gotten questions that are much more difficult than somebody else. So if you get a 700 and you walk out of there and you're like, oh, I barely passed, don't think of it as that. Don't think of it as 70% or just passing. Just think, hey, I passed and that's good enough, because the 700 could be a very good score depending on the weight of the questions that you received. The cut score, when we determine the score, like I said, all these different questions, they're rated differently. We use some psychometric analysis to evaluate the questions and determine their cuts, the overall exam cut score. So some of the questions, like I said, can be much more difficult than others. Definitely answer every question. There are questions, like I said, some questions that cannot be skipped. Do read the text. It'll actually tell you you cannot go back in this section. A lot of people get tripped up by that. They don't read that text at the top because everybody assumes, oh, I know what that says. That's just intro text. I don't need to read it. Take your time and read that text. It'll tell you before you start that question, you cannot go back from this question. And there's a reason for that, is because later on in the exam, the answer is actually in there. It actually will answer that particular question later on in the exam. I talked about performance-based testing, really super excited about this. This is actually getting hands-on, particularly hands-on with the Azure portal. So you'll actually get a lab, for instance, if you are on the infrastructure exam or the architect exam. There's some questions that you'll be asked to actually open up the portal and do things. So this really demonstrates your hands-on skills. You actually get really hands-on with it, and you're able to do it however you want. There's no real particular way. Some people are GUI folks who want to click through the interface. Some people want to fire up the Cloud Shell up there and actually do it through CLI or PowerShell. Whatever ways that you can accomplish this particular task, you feel free to do it. And one key thing that I tell folks on this is achieve the task and move on. So meaning that you can actually create another tab inside of your browser and go to the portal again and go on to the next task. You don't have to wait for something to provision. You don't really have to wait for something to spin up, because we know in Azure, like if you're creating a Kubernetes cluster, that can take a little bit of time, or provisioning a VM. If those are the tasks that are required of the lab, do that task and move on. If it takes a while to provision those things, that scoring all happens in the background, and it'll happen later after your exam. So just do the task and move on. That's really the key here. And don't get hung up on the tasks. They're not going to be super complicated, to be honest, because you only have a set limited amount of time. So you're going to notice that that little timer is ticking away, and is going to give you, at least me, gives me some anxiety as it's ticking down. But go do the task, focus on doing it, and just move on. Don't worry about, trying to accomplish that task and 50 ways of doing it. Just go do it and move on. So that's really the key there. So really quick, I'm going to throw out a bunch of terms, and you can refer to this slide deck later. I'll share the slides out. But understand that the entire development process has been standardized, as I mentioned. There's a lot of different terms to know: objective domain and an item writer. There's different item writers, of course, the subject matter expert that I mentioned. There's content development managers, project managers. There's all these different roles that go into actually developing an exam. And there's actually an overall process. We've actually developed a standardized process that all exams go through. You may have seen some exams that go into beta status, and folks may have taken beta exams. And that's a way for us to get feedback on the exam and make some changes to the exam before it goes live. And we actually take that feedback very seriously. So if you mark an item as you're going through the exam and you get to the end of the exam, I always tell people, please give feedback. I'm one of the individuals that actually reads the feedback, and I actually throw items out, or I reset the scoring, or work with the folks to reset the scoring on that particular exam. So if there's a lot of people that comment on a particular item and that item gets thrown out, you actually get credit for that item a lot of times. So if there's something fundamentally wrong with an item, which sometimes it does, software has bugs, things like that. Some of these exams have bugs as well. And if it gets thrown out, you actually get credit for that, and you can actually get awarded the credit for it. So in terms of question structure, again, know that all of the questions are actually structured very, very similarly. You're always going to see a technical environment or a scenario where you're a developer, you're an architect, you're one of those roles that I talked about earlier. You're an administrator. You have a problem statement. Something must occur. The app must do something. The environment must do something. You'll always have a goal statement. You need to accomplish this. This is your accomplishment. What do I have to do? And then, of course, the question statement. What should you do? Which 2 items should you do? In which order should you do those items? So again, the question statement will be in particular to that particular question, focused on that question. I talked about different item types. We've really gotten hands-on in terms of these item types, moving away from just standard multiple choice items. You'll see a lot of different item types I talked about the case study earlier, but the active screen items, these are going to include maybe a screenshot or simulate various controls on the screen. A lot of times an active screen will have build lists, especially in a programmer exam. You'll have chunks of code that you're going to have to configure. A lot of times those chunks of code, what I found was as an individual that was taking a multiple choice test, it was becoming a Where's Waldo scenario. What's the difference between these 4 chunks of code? And I had to sit there and Hawkeye the thing and try to find the difference between those 4. I hated that. I absolutely hated that. So the thought process was, let's make it a drop down that you choose from multiple different lines of code for that particular line in the overall program. So you're going to see something like that where you're picking drop down boxes. You might also have a build list. We call those put something in order. So you're going to actually put things in order. A lot of people hate these because they're like, well, I don't remember what order I put stuff in, but it's more of the thought process of what order does these items go in. So it'll tell you, in which order should you do these 3 things. And it'll actually tell you, the number of things that you have to select. So drag and drop's kind of obvious. You're going to drag and drop things. Maybe it's a process. Maybe it's a code snippet, something like that. Standard multiple choice. Graphic interpretation. You might get a screenshot of an error or something from the portal and tell me exactly, how that occurred or what have you in terms of that context. So know there's different item types. There's more than this. I'm just listing out some of the most common item types that you might see. So in terms of scoring, know that there is scoring applies in terms of a question. There may be more than 1 point assigned. So a multiple choice question, if there's 1 item you have to pick, well, that's 1 point. But if there's 3 items you have to pick, that actually still might be a 1 point question because you just have to pick all 3 for that particular question. But if it's, say, an active screen where you're picking multiple drop downs, well, each drop down might be a point because you're picking multiple pieces of code. So we try to make it as fair as possible in terms of scoring, and just know that some items actually are worth more than 1 point in terms of that scoring. And it actually says the text on the screen will tell you how many items to apply. Like I mentioned, put 3 items in order, select all the drop downs, and it'll actually tell you that if you read the text as well. So the item rules, I talked about the technical environment, the business plan, the goal statement. This is kind of giving you some strategies in terms of how those things are structured inside of an item. So I just want to be upfront and honest of how we structure items. There actually is some thinking around how we go through and structure each item, and they all follow this exact same process in terms of what's in each of these various sections. And we can refer to this again later. The item rules, again, the question statement, the instruction sentence, again, there are particular rules that we follow into what goes into these various areas. One of the areas is the instruction sentence. I tell people, please, please, please pay attention to what it says in the instruction sentence. That's very important, especially if you are having to select items or put them in order. It tells you exactly what to do, and a lot of people breeze over that. So I say, take your time. On an exam, you have quite a few hours to take the exam. A lot of people don't take, but maybe an hour or 2. But please take your time and read the questions. Right. Kind of going to skip ahead on the item rules. We talked about some of the different sections here. And these are areas that you can come back to in terms of requirements. But know that we're not trying to trick you as an item writer. We actually have to follow and describe why a particular answer was wrong. Wrong answers actually have to be 100% incorrect as well. Know that that's actually a rule. So a lot of people are like, well, maybe that might work. There's actually evidence that we have to write inside of the template that says this is 100% incorrect because of these particular reasons, and we're not trying to trick you. The thought process there is that we're trying to test your knowledge and validate that you know that knowledge. And I'm also a fan of not testing you on knowledge that you're just going to look up. whether it be in the documentation that you're going to have to memorize and look something up, some table, or anything that would be inside of IntelliSense. So if you're using Visual Studio and you're coding, and that's something that would come up inside of IntelliSense, I would not quiz you on, how many properties are in this particular object. I would not ask those kind of questions. Again, it's validating your knowledge and that you're in that particular role and validating your skill set in those roles. And no, it has to be plausible. We're not making stuff up. If I ask you a question, about how to attach to storage, I'm not going to put, use a cat's fur or something. I mean, it's got to be plausible and something that actually a developer might actually do, or that particular role. So here's an example practice question really quick. This is based on developing event-based solutions. You would actually not see that on the exam. You would just see the question itself. So you're developing a solution to support thousands of car dealerships across the world. The dealer locations will be sending data, all this different information. Dealer locations must display it in a real-time dashboard that shows vehicle sales, salesperson location focused information. You need to receive the data from the dealer locations. What should you implement? So what should you implement? That tells us, I'm assuming we have to pick one thing. Our objective is receiving the data from the dealer locations. And if we go backwards again, the dealer locations talk about real-time statistics. We got to focus in on real-time statistics. So this is a simple, when I say simple, it's a multiple choice. So if we understand the different services that are out here, Azure Storage Queue, Event Grid, Service Bus, or an Event Hub, we need real-time information. And on Azure, there's really only one answer here in terms of real-time information for implementations for this volume of data. And again, it's across the world, and they're going to send all of this information. And it's down to the Event Hub. So it's really understanding that Event Hubs are that streaming platform. And I actually provided a link in there that talks about messaging services and compares all those messaging services so that you'll understand the difference in the messaging services. So some tips and tricks, here's some rules and therefores. So these are a lot of tips and tricks. And again, I'll have you refer back to these. I won't go through these one by one, but understanding that you really have to key in on the skills measured area. I'm going to show that on an exam page a little bit later, but as you sign up for an exam, you're going to see the skills measured area. And that is really your blueprint of what topics are going to be on that exam. You saw earlier, we talked about the exam of the objective domain. The objective domain in terms of exam development is actually the skills measured area. That's the output of when we formulate an objective domain. That means what are the skills required and what topics are going to be on that particular exam. So that's really going to be your blueprint. So taking an exam, planning on taking the exam. There's a lot of different tools that are at your disposal in terms of understanding. And we're going to go through these tools really quick. But there's the MCP dashboard, so Microsoft Certified Professional. We love our acronyms at Microsoft, and of course, a lot of industries in IT, of course. The Microsoft Certified Professional Certification Planner. The exam page itself, as you sign up for the exam, you're going to see that skills measured area that I talked about earlier. The official Microsoft documentation, docs.microsoft.com, MSDN, TechNet, which I think everything is starting to move towards docs. Microsoft conference sessions, such as Build, Ignite, and others. And then, of course, Microsoft Press books. But I want you to be wary of non-Microsoft blog posts, third-party sites, and brain dumps. There are brain dumps and third-party sites that share information around exams. A lot of them may or may not be correct, and they're actually illegal in terms of the NDA that you sign before you take a Microsoft exam. So I just want you to be wary of those particular brain dumps. I've been fighting brain dump sites for years, and that's one of the tactics is to make them the questions much more complicated, to get hands-on with performance-based testing. and also to have hundreds of questions that you would have to memorize. So I dare folks sometimes to go do the brain dumps, because I've actually seen them. There's PDFs that are humongous. They have the questions and answers in them, but you're going to have to memorize hundreds and hundreds of questions, and you don't know which 50 to 60 might be on your particular exam. Plus, it's a hands-on lab, and how do you memorize a hands-on lab? So I discourage you from doing that. The MCP dashboard. This actually shows you how your learning journey is going in terms of you to sign in with your ID and show you how you're doing on your exams. You may have passed a particular exam. You can see here is my MCP dashboard. This was from a while ago. I took the DP 100 exam. I'm not a data science person. You heard me earlier, I'm apps and infra, but I actually did study and really wanted to understand data science and the basis of data science, so I could at least understand the terms and be participate in the room and understand what was going on. You will actually receive your MCP or MCID, which is a Microsoft Certified Identifier, after you pass your first exam. The MCID is just your ID that ties and represents you and what you've accomplished in terms of these certifications. And you'll see, again, this is your dashboard. It shows your badges, your certificates, and you can download a transcript that shows all your various certifications that you passed. You can actually allow others to access that transcript as well for verification purposes. The Microsoft Certification Planner, this actually shows you, it's an excellent tool to show you where in terms of the learning paths that you are for a particular certification. So if you don't know which exam I need to take to achieve the Azure administrator role or the Azure architect role, this planner actually shows you the different certifications that are required for the roles that you're looking at achieving. So there might be multiple certifications, exams that you need to take to accomplish that certification. And this actually shows you and helps you track towards that particular progress, as well as shows you kind of what you should take next, depending on your past exams and your particular interests that you're looking at. The certification planner does have some tips and tricks here. There is some interesting crossover between exams. Like I mentioned, those fundamentals exams, a lot of those are not really required. Those are good foundational exams, but if you're looking to get a particular role-based certification, say you're a developer and you've been a developer for many, many years, you're working on Azure, you know Azure actually kind of well, you actually can skip over the fundamentals exam and just take the developer exam and become developer certified on Azure. So it's not required to have the fundamentals exams. And there's a lot of carryover between the certifications, meaning that if you've taken one certification, you actually might be really close to accomplishing, say, a data-focused certification or vice versa, because there is various crossover between the exam paths. The exam page, I talked about this earlier. If you actually go out to a particular exam page, you'll see AZ100 at the upper left here, the exam designator. There's various exam numbers that represent those exams. So the AZ100 used to be the number for the Azure Infrastructure and Deployment exam. I think it's actually AZ103 now. We have a few iterations of that exam. But on the exam page, you'll see where you can schedule your exam. So you see that big yellow button to schedule it. It's typically $165 to schedule that. The skills measured area right there in the middle, those are collapsible that you can expand. And again, the skills measured is the most valuable part of this area. It talks about what exactly is on this exam and what does it cover. I talked about the objective domain earlier. Your skills measured is that path. And it shows you different ways to prepare for the exam, whether it be self-paced learning through Microsoft Learn. That's one of the resources that I'm going to show you and talk about. Instructor-led, if you're a person that wants to be in a classroom, if your organization's holding instructor-led trainings, those kind of things. And it shows you related certifications as well. So the actual exam page not only allows you to schedule the exam, but also really shows you that skills measured and what's on the exam overall. So again, the skills measured area, this is the expansion of that skills measured. This shows you exactly what to study. So if you're looking to study for a particular exam, I say study what's in the skills measured, nothing more. So there might be, other areas, especially with Azure exams. Azure is so big and the platform is so complex that there's a lot of areas that may not be on the exam that you might be studying for an accident. So I'm a developer, for instance, and I want to be an Azure developer. Should I study the cognitive services and all the various Azure search and cognitive services? That's actually an area that's not on the Azure developer exam. So I really, if I'm looking to take the Azure developer exam, I want to ignore cognitive services. I don't even want to look at it because I'm heads down trying to get the Azure developer exam. So please focus on the skills measured on the exam page. It's really going to help you stay on task and stay on target in terms of what to learn and what to focus on. So studying for exam, there's different types of learners. Figure out which learner you are. Are you an audio? Do you like to listen to audiobooks or listen to things? Is that how you grasp concepts? Visual, I personally am a visual learner. I learn by seeing things, reading things, seeing graphics, charts, and those kind of things. And then there's kinesthetic. Are you really good about doing and getting hands-on and working directly with the product? So think about those, and this shows you kind of different trends that we've noticed in terms of which different item types that folks are actually better at in terms of the exams. So some quick tips and tricks in terms of studying. Like I mentioned, I'm a visual learner, so I am a big fan of reading the skills measured. I will actually print out the skills measured. I will highlight things, and I will read the skills measured consistently and refer from the skills measured back to the Microsoft documentation and read articles associated with that documentation. So that is personally how I learned. Again, I'm a visual learner. If you're an audio learner, you may want to find a session from Ignite or some of our other MSDN events and actually listen to the session and listen to the topic and really feel comfortable around that area. So there are different ways to learn and do figure out what you are. You could use, of course, a mix of these studying methods. So again, I mentioned I'm a visual learner. This gives you kind of an idea of duration of how I study. Looking at, I typically have a tendency to schedule the exam at least a month out. So this says 3 weeks. I'm more of on the 4-week to even further out. And then I back into that date. So for instance, this is April. I actually have an exam scheduled for June around my birthday, and I'm going to back into that date. I've been studying for that exam for a little while now, and I'm actually going to take that exam here in June. Whether or not I pass, from my perspective, I'm going to give it my best go. But the nice thing is you can actually take the exams again up to 5 times in a year. And know that it's incrementally increases between those time periods. Of course, it's also $165 each time you take the exam. So do be wary from a cost perspective. So again, schedule your studying kind of back into what you're looking at in terms of the date that you're wanting to take this particular exam. And plan out those skills measured. Skills measured is going to be the focus of all of your exam process. And force yourself to study, even if it's going out to docs and reading, one article every day over lunch for maybe a half hour. Spend a half hour every day and force yourself to study. If it's say the DevOps exam. I love the DevOps exam. Huge fan of the AZ400 DevOps exam. They have a hands-on labs that are out there at AzureDevOpsLabs.com. You know, I actually took that exam. It took me 3 months to study, but I went out every day over lunch and I did a lab. So if you go and do all the labs inside of AzureDevOpsLabs.com, I'm pretty confident you're going to be very good on that exam. So if you get hands-on, you force yourself to study, you really have a pace of what you're looking at. And as I mentioned, book the exam. Go ahead and book it for 3-4 months out and back into it. That kind of forces you, again, that midterm and final thought process to really back into the exam and force yourself, hey, I've got an exam coming up. I really have to study. So it really helps you to manage your time and head towards that exam process. So I talked about Microsoft Learn earlier. Excellent resource. It's Microsoft.com/learn. It's excellent digital skilling. They've really put, in terms of the Microsoft learning folks, have really built out content out there. Excellent hands-on learning experiences, a lot of, and it's all free. That's what's amazing about it. They're self-paced courses, and they actually have lab experiences in some of those courses as well. I talked about the training events. We've talked about Ignite and Build and some of the different training events. A lot of that content is actually published online and freely available. So you can listen to that later on and learn about the different topics there. And of course, there is instructor-led training. I've talked about the classroom environment. There is Microsoft official courseware. And I actually encouraged a lot of my team to get the Microsoft Certified Trainer designation, the MCT designation. If you have a high-level certification inside of Microsoft, if you get one of these high-level certifications, you can actually apply to be a Microsoft Certified Trainer. And what it does is actually gives you access to all of that Microsoft official courseware. So you can actually deliver courseware if you want to have a second job. That's actually what I did. I became a Microsoft Certified Trainer and wanted to teach. I was an adjunct professor. I was for Creighton University in Omaha, and I was really interested in still teaching on the side. It turns out they pay you really well, and I live here in Florida. We love to cruise. That's one of the reasons. So I became an MCT was I wanted to pay for my. I joke my wife's cruising habit. So yeah. The other area is certifications. We've been talking about that today. Is validating those skills. So you're learning along that process, and again, it's focused on those role-based certifications. So signing up, taking those certifications, getting those credentials, and really applying them to your career. So last but not least, we'll go through taking the exam. I want to point out that you can take it in a test center, and I know we're actually currently on lockdown. You can actually take exams from home. So what's really neat is a lot of these exams, you could be sitting in your house at home. There is a caveat to that. I know I've tried to take exams from home. I have a lot of stuff in my office. You might be able to see, in particular, my office. I have the background up. That's right. My office, there's a lot of objects in here. When you take an exam from home, they actually ask that you clear out the room. The proctor that's going to proctor the exam has you show them the room from the camera and make sure that it cleans out the room. So it's a little bit painful in that respect. You're going to have to almost maybe take it in a barren room, but it's really helpful not having to drive to a test center. Make sure that you allot extra time, especially if you're going to take it at a test center, because you do have to sign in and go through a process. They take your cell phone and all that, because you're not allowed to have anything on you that they think you could cheat with. Bring 2 forms of ID. They're going to ask you, especially at a test center, that you have 2 forms of ID. That could be a government valid ID, as well as say maybe a credit card. So do make sure you bring 2 forms of ID. So this is the process flow of taking an exam. If you've never taken a Microsoft exam, ignore this slide and go take the exam right now. So I always encourage people, honestly, go take an exam. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to fail. That $165 is well worth the failure of you losing that money to understand what the process looks like and feels like, and the time that it takes, as well as what the exam questions look like. So I very much encourage you to go take the exam. Even if you studied maybe a little bit, we have a huge advantage within Microsoft. And I tell all of my colleagues in Microsoft, we get the exams for free. So we don't have to pay the $165, and we can go take as many exams as we want. So that's one of the reasons I signed up at Microsoft, because I can also take as many exams as I want every year. But it is $165. I mean, that's a lot of money. But I say at least go take it once, just to figure out what it feels like. But you can see essentially here's all the various process that you'll go through in taking the exam. It's obviously a legal agreement, and they talk about the time breakdown. A lot of questions come up around that candidate survey. In the very beginning, it's going to ask you a few questions in terms of a candidate. It's going to ask you, how efficient are you with this technology? It's just going to ask you some various basic questions. The question that I get, does that affect the test? No, it does not. So if I answered that I'm an expert on that and I'm an expert on that, does it mean all of a sudden I'm going to get a super hard test? No. That survey at the beginning does not affect the test at all. When the exam actually begins, it's going to kick off the exam engine. The exam engine goes out to a pool of questions. This pool can be hundreds of questions that have been written for the exam. It's going to pull 40 to 60 questions across all those different topics that are on that objective domain and create your exam. So every time you take an exam, the exam is going to change. So if you go take that exam today and you fail, and you go back tomorrow and go try to take it again, it's going to be a whole different exam. You might see maybe one or two questions that are the same. The engine might pull up one or two that are the same. Typically, the exam is going to be wholly different each time that you take that exam. And lastly, you're going to review. And again, this is where I tell people, go with your gut. Don't go back and start changing answers. Your first guess was correct. Do not change answers. You're going to go back and review, because you're going to give me feedback if the questions were really wrong, or there was something drastically wrong, something spelled bad, or something got you confused. If that's the case, we're going to give you, we're going to fix that, and we're going to say, hey, yes, that person deserves credit. And of course, at the end, you're going to actually get your results. And I encourage you to look at those results. We're going to talk about interpreting your results here in a second. But I really want you and encourage you to comment on the exams. Like I said, please don't go through and change your answers, essentially. Go with your gut. Don't go through and double guess yourself. But you can always mark an item for comment. If you see something blaringly wrong, or you're looking at an item and you're like, this is definitely technically incorrect, please mark it. Please give us some comments. Like I said, we can throw that item out, and you might get that rescored, and you might get credit for that particular item. So I really appreciate that feedback. Interpreting your results. I talked about 700 earlier, not 70%. Feel confident about a 700. If you got 700 and you walked out, you did fantastic. Just know that you passed. It is not a 70%. If you do fail, don't feel bad. I failed a lot of exams. I won't tell you how many, but I have failed quite a few. It's because either I didn't understand the topic, I didn't study the right things, or what have you. But what's really nice about this exam process is you get a printout, and it shows you at the end of the exam which areas of the exam, again, back to that objective domain or that skills measured, which area of the exam were you weakest in. So for instance, on the administrator exam, I was very weak on networking when I first took it. I actually failed the administrator exam out of the gate. I was very poor at networking. I didn't study it. I thought, I had a certified Novell administrator. I've dealt with Windows networking forever, and I did not pass it. I did not understand network security groups. I did not understand VNet integration. I did not understand service endpoints. I had to go in back and I had to study all of that. So I really studied up on that particular area because I was low, and then I went back and I passed. So it really tells you what areas to focus on. It's really, really handy. So please do use that area to focus in on those, on that skills measured area. And lastly, sign up for an exam. I really want you to go out, schedule your exam, Microsoft.com/learning. That will get you to the landing page that talks about all these role-based exams, and get you focused in on a particular exam. So find a role that you're interested in. If you're an administrator, if you're a developer, you're a data scientist, what have you, focus in on that role and really get hands-on with the various products. So whether it be Azure or data AI or what have you. So that's really what I'm hoping everybody's excited and wants to take the exam. That's all I actually had, and I can provide this deck. But were there any questions, comments, concerns?
Guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
Hi, Brian. This is Daniel.
Hey,
thank
Daniel.
you again. This is a good presentation. I got a lot out of it.
Thanks.
And, I'm studying for the implementing an Azure data solution.
Okay.
There's about 213 units in that Microsoft Learn. I'm doing it on Microsoft Learn.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, there might be a lot of different sections there. Yes, correct.
Yep. But I'm about halfway through. And on the one for create an Azure database for PostgreSQL, it kind of it wouldn't generate the sandbox on the exercise there.
Okay.
And I've been going back several times and it hasn't been able to create that sandbox. I did it in my own Azure subscription, but the Microsoft Learn is not recognizing that. So everything else is in that area is complete except for this one little unit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do about that. I sent in a like a help request thing, but I'm not sure if there's anything else I can do about it.
That's what I was going to tell you. Send in a help file a support request and see if we can't escalate that. A lot of times those sandbox environments are not spinning up due to either capacity in that area, or it could be that particular lab is seeing a possible capacity issue. So I would say, if you've tried multiple times, definitely file a support request. But if you were successful in your own subscription, good job. Sometimes those labs can not spin up due to some capacity situations, but you did the right thing in filing a support request. That's really all you can do. But kudos in going through the Microsoft Learn modules. That's especially for that area. There's quite a few.
Yeah, thanks. So your tip on going to the what's going to be on the test, that's I'm going to kind of do that now so that I can kind of get to it faster.
Yeah, no, understood. I was actually going to bring up, let me bring up the learning site real quick. Oops. If I can type Microsoft. Just to give you an idea what the portal actually looks like. And we talked about those role-based certifications. You can see here, keep pace with today's technical skills with role-based certifications. So it talks about going to those particular certifications and you pick a role essentially and work from that role. And that's what really keeps you on track. So I talked about the developer, administrator, solutions architect, there's functional consultant, especially around the dynamics space. And you can see all the various role-based certifications. So like I kept talking about, there's a database administrator. I was looking for the actual Azure administrator. But let's just pick one. This is an associate exam. So here's an exam page, and we scroll down, skills measured right here. This is exactly what's on the exam. So don't study anything more than this if you're looking to get the Azure Database Administrator Associate exam. You can actually download the skills outline. I think it's in a Word format. It'll download it. So yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I just want to make a comment that to Daniel that, overall, since the whole COVID madness, Azure's been experiencing a little bit of capacity issues. So normally it wouldn't happen, but unfortunately right now we're living in this alternate universe. So
Yes.
you did the right thing by submitting the help request. And yeah, if you want to just comment on which region it was in, I'll check. I'll follow up.
Yeah, we're giving priority to obviously first responders, hospitals, things like that, to help fight COVID-19. So our government, it's actually been requesting resources, and various governments have actually reached out to us for resources as well, especially in Europe, due to the fact that a lot of folks are working from home.
There's a question. Can you talk about a best approach for the beta exams?
Sure. Here's a trick, a tip or trick. Go take the beta exams. I tell folks, this is an insider tip, especially from an item writer. The beta exams are just that. They're beta. The problem with the beta exam is that you're not going to have a lot of learning resources. Your best resource is going to be getting hands-on with the product, and maybe some documentation there. The documentation might be lagging, but the nice thing about a beta exam is that the exam is in its early stages, meaning that the number of items in the pool is probably pretty small. So you might see the same items in terms of the actual exam. So if you went and took a beta exam, it's typically the entire item pool. We try to throw the kitchen sink at you in terms of all the items that have been developed to get as much feedback as we can. So the beta exams, a lot of times when you go in, it's kind of a no holds barred situation on the number of items. So I talked about the production level exams were 40 to 60 items. Beta exams might have 100 to 120 items on them. So you might go take a beta exam and you'll see 100 items. But the nice thing about taking a beta exam is it's so early in the process that even though you may have missed that question, due to some technical difficulty on that question or the way that the question was worded, it might get thrown out and you might get credit for it. So I hate to say it, you might pass a beta exam more than the live one, just for the fact that we're trying to, better the exam. But you used to be able to take beta exams for free. We actually request, I think, $50 or something to go sit a beta exam. And then we give you a certificate for a later exam as a thank you. And the reason for that was a lot of folks were taking beta exams or signing up to take the beta exam and actually not coming and taking the exam. So that actually didn't free up space for somebody else to take the exam, because we limited the number of folks that could take a particular beta exam. So now we're asking you to put a little bit of skin in the game effectively with the beta exam. But the best approach on a beta exam, get hands-on with the product, go read the documentation, and just go try it. Do your best on a beta exam. And I encourage you to go take beta exams. You might be very, very surprised.
So one more comment on the beta exams is that the results are not as quickly forthcoming.
Correct. Yep, I forgot about that. Thank you, Barca. Yeah, it does take a while to get your results back. It can actually take months to get your results back. So you may take a beta exam and you're not going to get your results that day or right away. It might actually take a month or two. So good point.
The other question is from Evelyn. She talked about, you talked about the hands-on labs for DevOps.
Yep.
Is there a similar site for data? So
Uh,
if you
yeah,
don't
I was
mind,
gonna
I'll
say.
answer that
Yep, go
because
ahead,
I'm a
Mark.
data person. Brian is a apps
Yeah,
and
I'm
infra
not.
person.
Yep.
So so as Daniel mentioned, the Learn portal has all the hands-on labs you will need to do the to get to the data DP 200 and 201. So if you follow Learn, that'll give you all the rules. Other than that, there are also yes, there tends to be more hands-on in apps and infra because it's much wider than data. And there are resources, and I'll post some additional resources for you. One of them is the Ignite tour that has some hands-on labs that are specific to data, and I'll post it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, excellent questions. And it's a lot of these exams, to be honest, we've been trying to refresh them, 30, 60, 90 days on the refresh, so that not only is it relevant with the product, but the fact is that you got to get hands-on essentially with the labs. And don't be intimidated by the labs. They're not really that scary. A lot of folks get into the lab and they think, I got to build this massive solution and all kinds of stuff. It's really just testing some basics, the administrator exam. Wouldn't I expect you to spin up a virtual machine in a certain region and, set up an availability set? I mean, if you've been hands-on with Azure, that takes you like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to kind of grasp and understand, especially, in terms of spinning up the virtual machine. And those are excellent resources that Barca is also posting in terms of the GitHub labs. And you can actually find, that's what's nice, the Microsoft Learning team has done a really good job of actually outputting the labs and a lot of the hands-on content out there. So on GitHub, which we're posting a lot of these, like here's the developer exam. I think somebody mentioned earlier, they were looking at AZ 204, which is the developing solutions for Azure. Right here's all the labs. If you want to sit down and go through all the labs, here's the classroom materials, all the labs you can actually go through and get hands-on with the developer AZ204 content. So it's actually freely available out there on GitHub under Microsoft Learning. And again, you can see, look at all these exams. Here's lab recordings, here's AZ500, DP100, lots of different exams and lots of different lab resources that are out here. So very, very helpful.
Yeah, funny. I just shared that same link. Yeah. So all of the labs that are in Learning are on GitHub, yep. And it's open. So you can just go look at it.
There. Yeah, which kind of blows my mind that they're handing that stuff, Microsoft hands that stuff out for free. Because back in the days, there's people that's their job. I mean, we're paying people to build that content and then we're just handing it out. It's cool, but it blows my mind. So yeah.
That's cool. I'm trying to schedule the 204 exam right now.
Do it. Yep. And schedule it for like June or July.
Yeah. It'll be halfway through June. I think I could do it.
Yep. So I was saying, put the finger in the wind, be like, yeah, it's maybe June, July, I don't know. And then kind of back into it. You can always move the exam as well. You can always reschedule if something does come up, but you got to reschedule early. Make sure it's rescheduled like 2 or 3 weeks, ahead of time. But definitely book that exam and back into it. That's one way to be really successful. So.
And if you're looking for the Wild Wild West, GitHub Microsoft has so much stuff, you'll stay busy for 10 years.
Exactly.
Brian, yep. I have 2 questions.
Yep.
One is Microsoft has any agreement with corporations to provide different pricing for the exams before this pandemic stuff? my company had a schedule, 2-day Azure Fundamentals course in-house, and then Microsoft was offering a free exam after that. It got postponed due to postponed or canceled. So I wonder if as we have MSDN subscriptions, do we have for corporations agreements on special pricing for the exams, or it's
Yes.
just
Yeah,
okay?
to answer your question, it depends on the organization. Yes. So what you were mentioning was the Enterprise Skills Initiative, which Microsoft is working with a lot of different corporations to, like you mentioned, run maybe a fundamentals exam or run various exams, courses, and then offer certification vouchers, to students that attend those. And we've been swapping to a virtual classroom, and there are ways essentially to work on pricing and vouchers for your particular interests, or your particular interest in terms of a certification. So to answer you, yes. And if a class was canceled, it should have went virtual, and you should have still have gotten a voucher. So I would encourage you to reach out to your Microsoft representative and see exactly, in terms of getting a voucher. So those vouchers are probably still available.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The second question is, when I take the exam from home, you mentioned that the room need to be empty.
Yes.
What is exactly that needs to be? I mean, what do I need to have in that room? Just a table, a computer, and that's it, or
Yep.
can I be in a room?
Yeah. It effectively, they actually have the rules on the exam pages. So if we go out, they talk about if you go out to microsoft.com/learning and you look at the proctored from home exams, it talks about what is required in terms of cleaning out the room. So they want to make sure that you can't cheat. So in terms of like having something in front of the camera, if you've had notes or something, they want the room clean because they don't want you to, to cheat effectively. So yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. But it can be in a in a bathroom, for example.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And I've actually taken one in my bathroom just for fun. Yeah, because they wouldn't accept my office. My office is just, I got so many toys and gadgets and stuff in here. They're like, maybe that, they thought maybe I was cheating from one of my gadgets. I don't know. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
And thank you for the information. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Any other questions or comments? It's been good. I appreciate all the questions. I'm very passionate around exams, so I love this process.
How does the exam compare to the Novell certification exam that you took before?
The Novell certification, what I took, that was quite a while ago. The Novell and Cisco exams are very hands-on. They actually put you in a lab environment where you have to troubleshoot a network. That's where I wanted to get us to in terms of Microsoft exams. And for the Azure exams, it is that way. So you actually are spinning up resources and troubleshooting and implementing Azure solutions. So I would say it's very much like that in terms of a lab environment, getting hands-on with the product, and actually deploying stuff inside of our data centers. So it's really, really close. And I love the fact that's the performance-based testing that I talked about. But all the rest of the exam is traditional, question and answer type stuff, put stuff in order, pick stuff, that kind of stuff. But overall, it's very hands-on. So I really like that aspect of it.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I definitely encourage everybody to go take the exam. If you are looking at an exam, it never hurts to have that on your, from a credibility perspective on your resume. And it also helps you, again, continually build those skills.
Okay, I think we did good. We are going to figure out a way to share the recording with you guys. We do have a YouTube channel. We may put it there. I'll see if I can get the deck from Brian and share it with just the group. I don't know if he wants to share it with the world. It's up to him. But definitely for our user group, we'll post it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian. This is really great. It motivated me to actually schedule it. So
excellent. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear folks are going and taking the exams and really, providing feedback and hopefully getting something, out of the exam process. So it's all about, honestly, at the end of the day with the exams, it's not about the exam itself or the certification. It's about the journey to the exam
learning
and learning those concepts. I mean, personally, I could care less that I have, 50 badges and 50 certs and whatever else. I don't care about that. I care about the journey and actually learning the stuff. It's just that it proves that, hey, I actually learned the right stuff and that I focused in the right areas. So, yep.
All right.
Very cool.
Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank you
everybody
very much.
for coming.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Now,
Thank you, everyone, for
Next
joining.
week, I have Jeffrey Palermo from Clear Measure in Texas talking about Azure and DevOps. That's on the 23rd on this channel.
Excellent.
Stay tuned.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank
All
you.
right, guys. Bye.